Welcome to the e-commerce growth show, brought to you by Segmentify.
Welcome everyone, and hello to another episode of the e-commerce growth show. And today I'm speaking to the co-founder and CEO of Bloomreach. His name is Raj De Datta. Hey Raj, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Phil. It's great to be with you here.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for taking some time out from sunny California, right?
Indeed. It's a little cloudy, but I expect the weather will turn in a few hours here.
Yeah, turn good, yeah.
Turn good, yeah.
Yeah, you know what it's like over here, right?
Absolutely.
Turn means something very different, usually for the work, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So let's start with a little icebreaker, and obviously, you've had some vast experience in your role and in the market that we're in. Tell us the most valuable lesson you've learned as an entrepreneur, businessman, and a family man.
Well, look, as those are great questions, and as an entrepreneur, I've been afflicted with the entrepreneurial disease, I would say, since the age of 22, and I'm now 46. So I've been doing this for 24 years in some shape or form, and I think and this is the third company that I've started, Bloomreach, along the way. And First of all, what happens is, as you keep starting companies, at some point you become fundamentally unemployable. So there's just no choice except to start businesses. But if I've learned one thing, it really is it's just to keep going. I often say to my own kids, "De Datta's never give up," and it's sort of a trite line, but on the other hand, that really has been the entrepreneurial lesson. Is you just keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, and if you have the persistence, often you outlast most.
Yeah. That's awesome. I got a question for you then. What's your take on the entrepreneurial gift, right? Do you think it's something you're born with, or do you think you can learn it?
Oh, I think you can certainly learn how to be an entrepreneur, but what you can't learn is the motivation to be an entrepreneur. Because there's in many ways it's become a celebrity pursuit, where there's all these famous entrepreneurs that do this and do that. But the reality of it is that 99% of it is a grind, and it's incredibly hard and fundamentally irrational to be an entrepreneur. So only somebody irrational with extraordinary desire simply just do it, does it. Now, and if you then think about how to be successful at it, there's a lot to learn about how to go about doing it. But often, perhaps the best story is when somebody picks up the phone and calls me, and it's usually a friend who's working for some large company, a Google or a Facebook or a Microsoft. They'll call me and they'll say, "Hey, Raj, I'm thinking about leaving my company and starting a new business and becoming an entrepreneur." And I will literally say to them, "Call me after you quit," because the number of people that think about becoming entrepreneurs versus the number of people who actually become entrepreneurs is a very different ratio.
Yeah. And why is that then? Because you're talking about like a certain, like you say, there's a lot of grind involved, there's a lot of work, but what sets it apart then that can make it? Because I've often thought about it as well, but never actually done it.
I think the odds are so stacked against you to be successful. Another thing I often tell people is that entrepreneurship is like having to win 1,000 battles in a row in order to qualify to fight the war. You don't get to lose along the way, because then you're dead. And yet you have some grander ambitions that in order to get to, you've got to fight 1,000 battles. And so it's those kinds of odds. That's one reason. And you raised the other question, which is about family. And a less talked about aspect is just the personal sacrifices that are involved are deep and not free. And so, I think that's another reason why fewer people do it. It's just easier to think about and harder to do.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, and obviously you mentioned, as a family man, you've obviously been able to multiple times bridge that gap with the sacrifices. Is that just like a massively kind of patient family unit that's helps you in some way? How do you manage that?
Well, no doubt. I think the best decision I made was to be, unemployed and trying to start a company when I got married to my wife, because she really didn't know any different from the time we met until now, 20 plus years later. So in some sense, we've never known anything different. But I think, without the kind of family unit that is supportive and that understands the ups and downs that come along with that, not just financial ups and downs, but emotional ups and downs that come along with it.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, hats off to you. Obviously, some fantastic achievements over the years, and obviously, from our space, from a personalisation perspective, there's a great respect for what you're doing. And it's really great to have you on the show, obviously, to kind of break some barriers down a little bit in our market, I think perhaps as well.
Yeah, I
find that quite refreshing.
I respect what you all are doing as well. And to my mind, in many ways, we're all in the business of just creating incredible experiences for people. And so if this quality experience is what you all do, what we do become more and more pervasive, I think we improve the web as a whole, and to me, that's more motivating than what happens between our respective businesses.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said earlier, I mean, there's a big world out there, and there's a lot of different needs, right? So it's just a question of really delivering, as you said earlier, I think, on making sure that we're really putting the customer first in every way, which is what everybody wants, right?
That's right.
So, I mean, moving on to a kind of a wider topic idea for our chat today, we were talking a little bit earlier about many things, but one of the things actually that I'm quite interested in is your take on AI, because I hear it a lot. I go out in the market and we talk about machine learning, we talk about personalization, and then we talk about AI. And I don't know, what's your take on genuinely what AI is, how it sits into the world of personalization, machine learning, and what is going on with all that? Give us your take on it all.
Absolutely. So, first, by way of background, when I started Bloomreach, which now is over 10 plus years ago, I pulled a team of people out of Google who had been involved in building the search engine at Google. And the thesis of Bloomreach in many ways was that quality of AI and machine learning technology that had been applied at places like Google and Facebook, just in many cases to serve ads, ought to be applied to every website and every app in the world to delight customers and end users in the process. And so AI has been at the origin story of Bloomreach for going back 12 years. And so what I can tell you as a kind of a former and poor engineer is that if you just look at it a little bit through a technical lens, the marketing definition of AI and the technical definition of AI are actually quite different. I mean, because technically AI is really a category of technologies that spans on one side from, with kind of machine learning, logistic regressions, things of that type, all the way to unsupervised learning and everything in the middle. And the difference between those two things, the way to think about it is, in one case, you're given the rules of the game, you're given a lot of data, and machines make sense of it, look at patterns of the past, and apply it for the future. In the case of personalization, it might look at similar cohorts of users. It might look at you and your behaviors, and it will make sense of those patterns. In many ways, a human being could do the same thing if only it could think at massive scale, which of course we cannot. That is classically called machine learning. On the other side of it are neural networks and deep learning. And that is, or in technical speak, often called unsupervised learning. And that is a little bit like the story of AlphaGo and chess, which is, for a long time when AI was playing chess, you would go and give it every chess game in the past and say, hey, now the machine is smart enough, it's seen every game of chess in the past, and so of course it's going to beat you, and that's machine learning. But on the other side, what if you never gave all the games of chess to the machine? What if you just told the machine, these are the rules of chess. You can move pawns like this, you can move bishops like that, here are the rules. Figure it out. That's true AI unsupervised learning. So really, we have been on this journey from supervised learning, machine learning, all the way to unsupervised learning. And increasingly, the newer neural network techniques are making it possible to do the latter. So that was a bit of a long technical answer to that question, but it perhaps demystifies AI for some.
It certainly has for me. That makes a lot of sense. So really, you are saying that taking past information and then using that to predict the future is really machine learning.
Yes.
Whereas there's a whole other world where you've got computer intelligence, if you like, which is almost working like a baby with a set of tools, doing its own journey to understand the world, right?
Yes.
But obviously does it in an incredibly clever, quick way.
Exactly.
Do they in our world then, in personalisation, do they sit together? Is one like doing one thing and machine learning doing another? What's going on then in that sense in terms of AI within personalisation?
All of the above are being applied from a technique perspective. And so personalization, I would say in many ways, we saw personalization in real life in the earliest days of Facebook, because Facebook was a news feed. And so, unlike Google was, I type a search query in, it crawls the world, it gives me an answer. And that's not really personalization in the sense that in the early days of Google, that's not about you. That's just about people searching. Facebook was always, it's my newsfeed. Your newsfeed and my newsfeed are pretty different. So it's by definition personalized. And so they were earliest to apply these techniques, I would say, to personalization at scale. There were academic literature much before that. But then we started to see that with Netflix. Then we started to see that with Amazon. Then we started to see that with more and more, categories. Today, I believe that AI and all the variants of it are and can be applied to personalization in a vast way, because often the truth of the matter is, if we're going to personalize an experience for you, we actually don't know very much about you. Your average brand, it's not like they've been following you for years and know everything about you. They have to take a small set of data points and the category and make sense of it, and then return, an interesting on-point set of results, content, products, whatever it might be. And so, AI techniques are critical to delivering, great on-point personalization. Yeah,
it sounds like quite a complex area. Certainly for my head to start to understand, when I talk to my partners, and because obviously, running partnerships with Segmentify, I talk about the platform and how the engines work and how they're collecting data to try and provide the best experience. But when you start talking about AI like that, it's like it fries my brain a bit about how it sits in the equation, But we should definitely talk about that again, because I know we've got some other things we'd like to cover, but really interesting to differentiate those two things. One of the other things that we talked about earlier was obviously, dealing with so many large brands across the world, and having been through the pandemic that's still going on, obviously, and we're hopefully coming towards the, an essence of control of it. You must have seen some incredible things in terms of the trends and so on that are going on. I'd love it if the guys who are watching and listening could get a bit of a flavor for what you've seen from your perspective in that time.
Yeah, well, so we had the good fortune at Bloomreach of powering almost a quarter of e-commerce in the UK and the US. So we saw a lot, first of all. And maybe the most important thing, which we all know, is that e-commerce in particular, really exploded last year. And we know that, it generally, we saw about 85 to 100%, depending on the category, of growth in year over year e-commerce after 5 years of 15% year over year growth. So effectively, the story of 5 to 7 years of e-commerce growth in 1 year became very real. I think what's been interesting is the sustainability of that. So we've not seen the decreases as stores have started to open up. Indeed, what we've seen is the people that were already doing e-commerce were spending more money on e-commerce. And the people that were not doing e-commerce all that much, perhaps in an older generation, were discovering e-commerce and not going back. And so certain categories, things like grocery. So we work with people like Ahold in Europe or Albertsons and Safeway in the US. Grocery saw several 100% growth, because grocery was a category that lagged, many other categories in terms of e-commerce. We saw the same thing among autos and auto parts. And so there's certain categories that started to leap forward that were historically lagging categories. We saw other categories like apparel, which have always been, and we work with people like Next in the UK, or Gap in the US, and Banana Republic. And what we've seen in apparel is that there was almost a shift in what people were buying. You know, people were in the middle of the pandemic buying loungewear and things of that type, and maybe buying, you know, there were fewer people buying men's suits, you know, to go out as you would expect. And so there was a shift in the nature of what people were buying in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, and the final thing I'll just mention is that there were some surprising things. So we all know the stories of certain essentials, toilet paper and eggs and things of that type that flew off the shelf and ran out in the early days of the pandemic. But there were also things like, you know, an example that surprised me is jewelry. And we have a number of customers in the jewelry area. And I would have thought people are not going out, people are not buying jewelry. But instead, what we saw was that, you know, because I could not attend, you know, I couldn't take my date out for Valentine's or attend a wedding, you know, of a close family friend, because I couldn't go out and attend those things. Instead, what I was doing is sending jewelry. And so certain categories grew unexpectedly, I would say, during the pandemic as well. Yeah.
No, definitely. I'm quite a keen follower of the stock exchanges and stuff, and I totally I was amazed. Like there was an update from Watches of Switzerland Group,
right?
And I thought, okay, well, clearly people aren't buying watches, right? Absolutely unbelievable growth, you know.
Exactly.
Exactly. And then I was, you know, hearing you know, updates from Next about how they're expanding their, you know, product sets out of what they're doing into, you know, DIY and building garden centers in their stores and stuff. Pretty incredible kind of, you know, stuff going on. I mean, what is your take? I know this might be a bit of a basic question. Your experience with big brands that didn't make it in terms of the digitalization world, if you like, versus the ones that have. So let's say, for example, you know, your Debenhams versus your ASOS or even your Next, actually, in terms of some of the like for like, lots of bricks and mortar presence. What's your take on the ones that survived and thrived and the ones that didn't?
Yeah, I think that retail has been through just an extraordinary cataclysmic transformation over this last several years, and you know, there were two questions I think that people would ask me almost regularly from every one of these brands. One is what you asked, which is, you know, why do some make it and why do some not? And then the second question became, well, the ones that do make it in digital and really make it big, how do they win in digital? But let's start with digital versus sort of stores to begin with. I think the people who understood that digital is the business, and digital is not the sideshow that I run a business on the side and it does its thing. And I continue to be in the retail business, the store business, as I have been for 100 years. And okay, I've got this digital business unit off to the side doing its thing. Those people don't make it, because fundamentally that's not how shoppers think. That would be a little bit like you and I getting up in the middle of the day and saying, you know, on Monday we shop digitally, but on Tuesday through Sunday we shop in stores. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So businesses that ran their businesses in that way ultimately, you know, don't work, because the consumer has changed so profoundly that if you don't simply say digital is the business, and actually the store is a fulfillment vehicle, the store is a marketing vehicle, et cetera, and manage accordingly, it fundamentally, you know, doesn't work at all, I think. And you know, what I believe is that retailers of the future are either marketplaces or brands. The usual business model of I buy other people's products, I stock them on shelves, and people come in the door and they buy them. Well, now the internet has made, you know, the ability to shop anywhere really, really one click away. And so therefore, I either have to become like Amazon or Walmart or Next, which is more of a marketplace with large selection online, or I have to become a brand that people love, that people have affinity to, people have loyalty to. And if I don't pick between those directions, then I get stuck in the middle. And that has happened to lots of the Debenhams of the world in that process.
That is That's really interesting. Actually, I've got a question related to that. So when you mention brand or marketplace, are you seeing then the growth of marketplaces outside of Amazon across the world? I've noticed it. I know people. I think I had a chat to Storsome, Graham, last week actually, and he was saying, "Look, it's already done, mate. It's already there." But have you seen that as well? Is there going to be this kind of insurgence of marketplaces kind of outside of Amazon as well as the brands?
Without question. I mean, now I think on the marketplace side, we're seeing specialty marketplaces of all types. You could imagine auto marketplace, you could imagine a grocery marketplace, you can imagine if you take somebody like Etsy, they're a marketplace for all kinds of knickknacks that are possible. So yes, absolutely. I think we're seeing marketplaces extend beyond Amazon and Walmart and Alibaba and folks of that type. Now, there's only so many of them because you've got to have extraordinary scale to operate a marketplace. Farfetch in the UK would be another example. Marketplace. Mm-hmm. So, we're seeing marketplace growth, but you're never going to get thousands of marketplaces. You will get hundreds of marketplaces because you do need significant scale. But we will have more than Amazon and Walmart and Alibaba, for sure, in that process. What we will have is hundreds of thousands of brands going online, and we see this with Shopify. So when Shopify, when the Shopify ecosystem, which now has more than 1 million brands on it, and even hundreds of thousands that are on Shopify Plus, which means they have a certain level of scale as well. That is just exploding, where brands are saying, I used to sell through a retailer, now I sell direct online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very interesting what's going on at the moment. I mean, just you mentioned earlier about the customer, actually, and we were talking previously about your book that you've just completed. And in that book, you talk about the difference between a seeker and a customer. Could you explain to the guys about the book and the background, what you mean by that?
Sure. So, I wrote the book because people said, hey, Raj, you're investing in Silicon Valley startups on one side and seeing all these brands win big. Tell me why the winners win in a really big way, in digital specifically. Yeah. And so, as I did my research, and I probably spoke to over 100 brands, systems integrators, startups, all kinds of folks, what became really clear is that if you do not redefine who your customer is digitally, then you actually never succeed. And that led me to the distinction between the seeker and the customer. So let's use an example to make it really practical. Imagine that you're booking a family vacation. And so what do you do when you're booking a family vacation? Well, you go and you say, well, where am I traveling? I'm going to do some research. I need a rental car. I need a flight. I need a hotel. I'm going to pick some restaurants. I need some tour excursions. So effectively, I created a digital to-do list of all the things I'm going to go do to book that vacation. I'm actually a customer of the rental car company, of the hotel, of the flight. I'm actually a customer of probably 20 services that are involved in that vacation. But I'm just a seeker of a memorable family vacation. Right. So the customer is a customer of individual transactional pieces that come together. The seeker is the underlying motivation for that transaction in the first place. Which is, I want a memorable family vacation. And it turns out that the best digital experiences build for the seeker, the underlying motivation, not for the customer, the transactional entity that's coming to me. Yeah. We've all been spoiled by Amazon and think that we need to build Amazon, but Amazon is one kind of e-commerce kind of activity. But if we take examples just to see where people have done this for real, if I take somebody like a Stitch Fix versus a large a Nordstrom in the U.S., which is a luxury department store. Nordstrom sells me clothing. Stitch Fix says, I'm going to give you a personal stylist, and the clothing will come out of the stylist's recommendations for you, because they know that you're really seeking to express your style. You're not really seeking the clothing. The clothing is a transactional purchase that you make at the end of it. Now, I have loyalty to Stitch Fix. They understand me so deeply. Speaking of personalization, they know my personal style. They can give me an experience that's much different than Nordstrom, that only knows that I bought this pant and I bought this shirt and I bought this belt, along the way. And there's example after example of the winners in digital building for the seeker, not the customer.
Got it. So that's interesting. So my question then is, can anyone build their site or their store, right, for the seeker?
And the answer to that is yes. And
really?
that's what's amazing is it used to be that these kind of digitally innovative ideas were the province of Silicon Valley and technology startups, but it's not anymore. And let's take some classical businesses. If we in Europe, if we were to take somebody like NHS Digital, which is which very well in the UK, public sector, hardly you would say the most innovative entity in the world. Yeah. And yet, they built something that I think is very much serving the seeker, which is called a symptom checker. And what it is it's an application where you're at night, your child is sick, you're trying to figure out if you should rush to the emergency room or not. You can go take the app, plug in the symptoms, and it will at least give you a sense of whether this is an urgent care situation or whether or not this is something that I can just treat with an Advil or an ibuprofen or something of that type. And so it is built for the seeker because it's not trying to give you medical advice on the spot. What it's trying to do is reassure you as a parent in the middle of the night that you either have somebody who is really sick or somebody who is can be treated okay, and you shouldn't panic. And that reassurance is actually what you're seeking. If I were to give you one more example from Europe, it would be a football team, Bayern Munich, which is a Bloomreach client as well, like NHS Digital, and Bayern Munich, you would say, is a local soccer team. So if they were thinking about customers, they would say, well, my customers are fans of the soccer team. But in reality, what they realize is they have millions of fans across the world, all of whom want to virtually experience the football game, many of whom can't make it to Allianz Stadium. And so they create this digital experience that includes virtual reality, where I can pretend I'm my favorite player, I can buy the jersey, I can transact online, I can receive a personalized experience, I can pretend I'm at the game, all these things. And in effect, Bayern Munich has understood that indeed they're actually more like a media company than they are a football team. Yeah. And they've built a digital experience accordingly. So absolutely, like we've seen incredible successes from all kinds of organizations that maybe you would not put at the top of the list as the most innovative commerce entities.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I don't know, maybe highly commoditized brands, or like your tool company. I mean, do you think it is genuinely something that every type of vertical, within e-commerce should be looking at because of that importance of the seeker to the customer differential?
I do, and I think you can ask a few questions, and it's all about the whys. Why is someone buying my product or my brand? For what purpose? What underlying human condition or impetus or desire is it catering to? And then and the book outlines this in great detail. It's not intended to be a theoretical book. It's intended to be a practical book. And it's a practical book because it lays out the playbook, which starts fundamentally with understanding who your seeker is. And there's a number of techniques to do that. And then it moves into, well, all right, now that I understand the seeker, what technology do I need to put in place in order to serve that seeker? And finally, what do I need to do in my own organization? Who do I need to hire? How do I need to constitute my team? What business model do I put forward? How do I think about capital? What are all the organizational constructs that I need to put in place to deliver a great experience to the seeker? So I've always thought about it as it's really a three-part problem. Understand the seeker, build the technology for the seeker, and then build the organization to serve that seeker in the long term.
Yeah, really interesting. I think that book is going to be pretty cool, and I'm going to try and get hold of it, I think. But
for sure.
No, it's really interesting, and you're kind of reminding me in some respects of going back to the nuts and bolts of segmentation, really, in many ways, right? I mean, you're looking at providing a better experience for a certain cohort of people, well, actually they are still seeking, right? I mean, when I'm a bargain hunter, I'm seeking the experience of finding cheap stuff that I can buy, right? That's the experience. If I'm a VIP, I want to have an experience where I feel special when I engage with your site. So in many ways, it's a little bit similar, isn't it? That the whole idea of personalization is to try and provide the best experience, not just chucking products at somebody, but content, banners, the whole kit and caboodle, if you like, when you're engaging with the site. And one of the things that's reminded me of is something that Segmentify has recently developed, is this concept of the journey builder, which reminds me again of what you've just been talking about, where the customer is wanting experience. You know, they're going to the pharmacy site because they've got an allergy and they need to find a solution, right? Like the NHS example you put.
Yeah.
Or I am a customer looking for a certain set of criteria in order for me to make a decision on that experience that I receive. So do I want to go and engage with a transactional website to sit through and try and find it? Or can I pre-qualify, almost like by an entry questionnaire, if you like?
Yes.
That then pre-qualifies me in terms of exactly what it is I'm looking for. And then the engines then give me the experience I'm looking for. So
that's right.
That it just resonates with me. All this stuff that we're currently looking at completely makes sense and aligns with this great book that you've written.
Thank you. Yeah. And, and in the digital seeker, what we explore a lot is there are different flavors of personalization, and you've just listed a few of them. There's some where, I just come in the classical example of people who viewed this, bought this, or some simple recommendation unit, wisdom of crowds sort of personalization. And indeed, that's one level of segmentation. Then there's a level of segmentation that, as you say, I'm a member of the loyalty program, I'm a VIP, and therefore I get a certain quality of experience. And then there is personalization that comes from my behavior. So I may not have told you I'm a VIP, but because I have bought these really expensive products, you imply from the technology that I'm indeed a VIP and that you should treat me in a particular way. And then finally, you might think about what one would call explicit personalization, which is I literally submit a form. And that's what you do in a case of something like a Stitch Fix, where I say, I prefer this brand, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. And I give you these explicit instructions and you factor that into what you provide me. So there's lots of different ways to sort of understand the seeker and then personalize the experience accordingly. What's important from that is, one, we live in a world of increased data privacy. And so it's more and more about the individual and consent and their consent, and then delivering an experience to do so. And number two, I always believe that you don't just get to take the data and personalize. You have to give value to the customer every step of the way in that journey. In order to deliver a great personalized experience. You can't simply say, I'll learn all about you and one day I'll give you something amazing. You need to, if I'm going to get a piece of data from you, I need to return back something of value.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the key things, isn't it? Is that accuracy and the speed that you're actually learning and then giving that experience back. You can't wait, you've got to do it now, and it's fortunate, I suppose, that having Segmentify, having been born in cybersecurity, you've got no luxury of time or information. So you have to be refining tens of thousands of times a second in order to create that experience that we're talking about, But Raj, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. I've really, really enjoyed it. Learned loads, and it's fantastic to have somebody with such amazing experience to be able to offer the guys that are watching and listening. So thank you so much. It's been brilliant.
Thank you, Phill. I enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, no, not at all. Tell the guys the best way to get hold of you for the book, just having a chat with you, the team, if they're interested in your solutions.
Yeah, so bloomreach.com, BLOOMREACH.com. That gives anybody who's interested in the platform
Sure.
a good sense of the platform. And on the
Yeah.
book itself, you can just go to Amazon and you can search for The Digital Seeker, and
Cool.
it's available.
Amazing. It sounds great. Yeah, the last thing I'd love to ask you, to be honest, you've imparted quite a bit of wisdom already, right? But if you could just delve into the vaults of Raj De Datta, from your personal life or your business life, what would you give as a kind of a golden nugget to all the guys that are listening and watching to take away with?
Yeah, well, look, I think as it relates to e-commerce,
Yeah,
we're in the adolescent stage of e-commerce. So we've got an industry now that's 15 to 20 years old, which is still very young. Think about every 15 to 20-year-old in your life. That's about the level of maturity of e-commerce. So we're in early innings of this ride. So if you're in this industry in some shape or form, working in technology, working at a brand, working anywhere in the industry, I think we're in for just the golden era of what's going to happen. And I encourage everybody to remember that the first 20 years were simply about doing e-commerce. The next 20 years are going to be about standing out from the crowd and really understanding what makes your experience particularly special, that gives a consumer or a customer a really good reason to come shop with you. And that means going beyond the ability to just simply do e-commerce, but to really offer the kind of magical experience that allows you to stand out. Yeah,
totally. I think like you say, I think we still see that personalisation. You're still talking about like the tip of the iceberg. That's real. Right. It's not, like we say, it's not product recs and on-site search and merchandising. It's so much deeper than that. And right. as the market progresses, it's only going to become more and more important that the boundaries are pushed, right, in terms of, like you say, differentiating and getting ahead, as what we've seen so far. But thank you so much for that advice, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have had a great time, and just remains for me to say that if you haven't already, please do go over to segmentify.com/EGS, and you'll pick up all the episodes there, including Raj's. And if you sign up, then you'll get all the different shows that come out. And the other thing just to say is, if you're interested in getting involved, or you got any things that you want us to research or talk about in the future, or you want to be on the show, give us a shout anytime at Phill@segmentify.com. But thank you so much, Raj, again for your time.
Thanks, Phill. Appreciate it.
No worries. And hopefully I get to speak to you again another time. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Take care, and God bless.